My name is Tom Moore. Every Wednesday night I'm here on Facebook Live to tell you a story that I've written and entertain you in one manner or another. So tonight I'm going to read a story that I wrote called Pegasus. It's about a boy and a flying horse. It's a Greek legend really, but I sort of set it in Newfoundland. See what you think. It won the Newfoundland Arts and Letters Competition Award for Fiction recently, and I hope you like it. And the other thing is, if you'd be kind enough to share this video, I pick a name out of my shared video people every week and I'll send you out a free book. So let's have a look at Pegasus, shall we? As I said, Pegasus is about a boy and a horse. But on another level, it's about an escape from reality. And there are an awful lot of symbols and images in the story from our religion, the Christian religion. You'll see the Palm Sunday, you'll see the resurrection, and you see the crucifixion, but also other religions too, like for instance the Greek religion. You'll see Icarus and Daedalus and escaping the Isle of Crete, father and the son. You see Pegasus, the flying horse, title. See what you think. Here we go. It starts with the Garden of Eden. You'll know that because there's an apple. Pegasus. When I was a boy in Avondale, my mother read me a story about a flying horse. His job was to pull the sun across the sky. And he talked to the sun, to the moon, and to the stars. That same summer, a real horse appeared in our meadow. He shook his shiny black coat and his shoulder muscles rippled over sturdy bones. We cut and stowed the summer hay, and the horse gnawed on the aftergrowth. Soon I was climbing the fence to be with him. Father showed me how to give him an apple from an open hand so he wouldn't nip my fingers. He munched on the new grass while I ran around the meadow looking for birds' nests and other treasures. Excuse me. One day I was running across the field with a thin grey cloud sky flying overhead. My jacket was open and the wind whipped it around me. I grabbed the zipper on each side and raised the jacket up like a sail, and the wind lifted me off my feet. When I regained my balance, I saw the horse looking at me. I ran up the little hill and took off again. Perhaps I flew. I landed easily this time and looked towards the horse. But his head was down, grazing, like he'd seen it all before. A boy flying across a garden. That same summer, my friends and I were walking up to Lee's Pond for a swim when someone shouted, "Look, here," and held up a long bone. Under a cairn of stones we found more bones, white with age and light as feathers. There were ribs and shins and jawbones, too big to be human. We drew them out from the rocks like magic swords. "Dinosaurs," Megan Redmond announced. We all agreed and proceeded home with our precious relics. But Father said, "Tom Cal buried an old horse up there years ago. Next time, take a different path to the pond." One day, Father put a bridle on the horse and a steel bit in his mouth. No saddle, just a woolen blanket. "Do you want to ride him?" he asked. "I don't know how." "Give me your foot." He held the reins in his left hand and placed my foot on his knee. I put my hand on his shoulder and slithered across the horse's back. "Nip your knees tight and hold on to his mane," he said. The horse shook his skin under me. I pushed my hands down on his withers and felt the solid bone, long and white under the warm flesh. He snorted and pulled his head up as Father walked us across the meadow. After a week, I could ride the horse alone. Father said, "Hold the reins tight and go slow, no gallops." But soon I was riding at a trot, and once at a gorgeous, weightless gallop. Father borrowed a saddle so I could ride along the old railroad track beside Lee's Pond. The iron tracks were gone now, but there was a straight path where the train once ran. I would dig my ankles into his sides, and he would explode and fly down the path faster than a train. But one day, he turned his head and crossed the ditch into the thick trees. I pulled hard on the reins, but he kept going. I reached to smack the side of his head, and he almost threw me. At last I took one rein in both hands and pulled till his head turned and he was pushing sideways through the trees. At last he stopped, stuck, panting. I was panting too, flying on adrenaline. Arms, legs, face scratched by the spruce branches. Time stopped. In the warm woods, as the horse stood in the trees, a crow cawed. I pulled the rein back against his mouth and smacked him because we were not friends anymore. He looked behind at the trail of broken branches and flattened shrubs. Then he swung around and walked back to the railroad track. We emerged from the trees all sweat and drool, scratched and bleeding. We frightened two berry pickers, and the ride home was a somber affair. "What happened to you?" Father asked. "He took off into the trees. He wouldn't stop. Crazy damn horse." I crawled off and walked away, not even looking back at him. Father put salve on the horse's legs, and Mother threw my ripped shirt into the garbage. In the bathroom, I stood on a chair as she put hydrogen peroxide on my cuts. Father spoke through the closed door. "Is he all right?" "A bad cut on his bum," she said. "On my hip," I corrected her. "Is it deep?" "It'll heal." "How did you get a cut on your bum?" he asked. "The horse went sideways." I was almost crying. Sideways? The scratches on my narrow shoulders were red and raw. My ribs were rising and falling, but I didn't cry. Crazy horse ran into the trees. Later that night, Father explained. He saw a fox, or remembered something from his past. Remembered? Yes. Horses have bad experiences just like people. He sat beside my bed. Crazy horse. My ribs heaved again. Father looked at the floor, searching for the right words. "Sometimes you got to ride a horse the way he's pointed," he said. This comment stumped me, and I shot back, "What do you know about horses?" He considered my insult for a moment and said, "We always had horses to plough and haul wood. When Uncle Martin went over to the Boer War, they put him in the cavalry." "Big deal," I said. "Uncle Martin said that a horse would tread between corpses." Father looked out my window into the night. Corpses. A shell would land in a campfire, and bodies would lie around the shell hole. Horses would tread between the corpses, never touch one. Why not? They were afraid of slipping. If a horse broke his leg, you had to shoot him. Why would you shoot him? A horse's leg bone never mends. I thought about the cairn of stones and the long white bones. Father checked the cut on my hip. "That will leave a scar," he said. Then he checked my hands and arms. "Your mother did a good job." He pulled a blanket over me and shut my door behind him. I closed my eyes. In the morning, I threw the sheet aside and rose from the bed. I looked in the mirror at my ugly scratches and the stinging reds and blacks and blues. Soon my wounds healed, and I looked again at the horse in the garden. One day I offered him an apple from an open palm. Before long I was back in the saddle, and we rode again across the meadow and down the old railroad track. But summer ended, and the horse had to go home. Father couldn't bring him in the truck, so the best way was for me to ride him. Father said, "Take the main road from Flynn's store till you get to the graveyard. Then go down the old Goat Shore Road. It'll be safer. No cars." Okay? But Father had something else to say. "I want you to hold the reins tight. Pull back against his mouth." "The whole way?" "Yes," he said. "Won't that hurt him?" Father leaned in over the horse's neck. "Listen to me," he said. "This horse weighs 1,000 pounds. You weigh 80 pounds. You don't want him thinking about that. Let him know you're in charge. He'll be frightened, and he needs to know someone is in charge." "Okay," I said. But Father was still thinking, deciding if he would let me ride a horse 2 miles in traffic. "Keep on the gravel shoulder when you can, and the pavement is slippery for his shoes. Once you get to the graveyard, you'll be fine." We started our journey down the station road on the gravel shoulder. A car horn blew and the horse stiffened. I patted his shoulder like Father did in the meadow. Another car passed and someone shouted my name. But the horse just swung his head and walked on towards the graveyard. When we passed Flynn's store, people came out to the window to see a boy on a horse. Others smiled and stood back so we could pass, like a memory of old times. The blue Atlantic was on our left and the flaming hills of autumn on our right. Spruce and balsam waved in the wind. Maple and birch threw their crimson leaves like palms at our feet. Soon the graveyard beckoned us down the Goat Shore Road. I pulled the reins hard to the left, and the horse crossed with the clickety-clack of iron on asphalt. The little gravel road ran down to the ocean with the graveyard on our right. I could see my family plot where Uncle Tom and Aunt Kitty lay awaiting our arrival, berths ready for that last long voyage. But not today. Grass grew between the wheel tracks from men and horses long ago. The trees fell away to a rocky beach on our left and the high hills on our right. The sea air struck us, and the horse snapped back his head and whinnied. A half a mile of straight road, no asphalt, no trees, no cars, lay before us. I patted his neck and I loosened the reins in spite of Father's orders. The horse shook his head and whinnied again. I dug my ankles into his sides, flicked the reins down hard on his neck, and I shouted, "Giddy up!" His first leap surprised me, but I held on, and soon he hit his stride. All four hooves lifted, touched the earth for a moment, then into the air again, and again, and again in a rhythmic stretch of horse, earth, wind, and water. The long, slow motion stride, effortless, magic. We were flying. We were beyond the graveyard, beyond the church, beyond the earth, the sea, and the tide. This was our time to ride just as fast as we dared along the beach and up, up, up into the sky. No wings melted that day as we talked to the sun, the moon, and the stars down that graveyard road long, long ago. The end. Now, before I say goodbye to you, if you'd be kind enough to share this video, I'll pick a name and I'll send you out a free copy of my book. So I thank you for your kind attention to my story. It means a lot to me. And I'll be back here again in a week. Next Wednesday evening, 7 o'clock, Newfoundland Standard Time. I look forward to seeing you again then. Good evening.